generally start with our land acknowledgement to acknowledge that we're situated on traditional Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee territory, and we're very grateful to live, work, and play on this beautiful land. So I think we may have some people coming in, but I'll admit them as they come. We did lose Rhett, so I'm hoping he's going to be back. But we're really, really lucky tonight to have Skylar Williams with us to kind of give us an overview of what's going on and stuff. And we really appreciate the time that you're taking to do this. And it fits in so well with one of our purposes, which is getting educated on Indigenous issues and then being able to share that education with the community. So Gary, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce Skylar to us.
Okay, awesome. I got a very brief introduction to Skylar because I know he's has a lot of information to pass on to us, and there's a ton of questions to ask him, I'm sure. But basically, here's Skylar. If I'm wrong on any of this, let me know, right? Skylar is 48 years old. He's married with 4 children. We just heard he has 4 girls, all teenager years. Skylar is a spokesperson for the Land Back Lane movement in Caledonia. He's a structural iron worker by trade. Born and raised on 6 nations, Skylar can speak Onondaga and understand a bit of Cayuga, which are both 6 nations' traditional languages. Skylar is also a spokesperson for his community in the proposed Douglas Estates development in 2006. For which he got to serve time in prison, and a good part of that in isolation. I don't want to go into any more than that. Skylar, I want to turn it over to you. Educate us on all the goings on this Caledonian nonsense. Just educate us, please.
Oh, geez, where to start? And so, yeah, I guess let's get some of the history out of the way first, I guess. Oh, I feel like I've frozen you here.
We can hear you fine.
Yeah, we've lost his volume to his.
Yeah, for a moment.
There he is.
Yeah. Sorry, this is what I'm talking about. And so yeah, I'll start with the history, and the history at this particular parcel that we're talking about here at 1492 Landback Lane goes back 170 years, wherein squatters were being encouraged to start to populate this particular area of the Grand River. And so there was a particular squatter in 1847 who happened to be rolling through town and seen a particularly nice chunk of land that he wanted to clear for farming. He cleared that land and stayed there for about 5 years and had a farm. And about 5 years later, the Nichols family, they moved into Caledonia, and again were being encouraged by the federal government at the time, which was the Brits at the time, I guess. And so yeah, so he that family was able to purchase that land off of that squatter for 500 English pounds. And so after their family had managed to hang on to that particular tract of land that goes from Mackenzie Road to Argyle Street, it's about, I don't know, 1.5 kilometers, 2 kilometers wide by about 3 kilometers long. And so yeah, it is a pretty significant chunk of land there. And so that Nichols family, they held on to that land until 2003. And so that's when that's when a developer by the name of Michael Corrado, he owned a company called Springfield Homes. He bought that land with the intention, as well as the Douglas Creek Estates lands, now Gunnestown, was the 2006 reclamation that lots of our community members were involved with. So they all bought these lands in 2003, thinking that there was some big bylaw changes that were happening. And so all of that land from the east side of Mackenzie Road all the way to the bypass that goes through Caledonia, around Caledonia, was slated for development, for housing development. And it was going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,500 to 4,000 homes. And then so in 2006 or 2005, construction got underway with Douglas Creek Estates. They went into there and hello?
We can hear you.
Yeah.
You're good.
All right. So yeah. Oh, there we go. We're back. Yeah, and then in 2005, construction got started in Douglas Creek Estates. And 2006, our community had, and during that time that development had started, our people had started to petition government to do whatever it is that we could do to try and settle that without direct action on the ground there. And then in 2006, a group of women had gotten tired of the government pandering and had decided to start to leaflet the front of the development and started handing out pamphlets. And some of the developers at that time took real offense to those women that were handing out those pamphlets, and it became a very tense situation very, very quickly. And then shortly after that, that was February 27th, and then on the 28th, they went back to start leafleting one more time, and then there was a dump truck that emptied a load of gravel at the feet of some of these women. I went in there that day, and that was it. It was on after that, and the occupation had begun. We pushed the developers out that day, and again, it was a group of about a dozen women that were, between 35 and 85, and went in and pushed these developers out and said, absolutely no. And this is the way that you're going to be treating the women of our community? Absolutely not. And so then they went home that evening and called a bunch of us young men to go down and make fire and do all of the things that they needed us to do to be able to maintain a presence there. And so we started camping there that winter. It was a cold winter. We spent that time there, and April 20th, the OPP raided the site there. They arrested, I think it was about 15 or 16 people that day, and and they managed to hold on to the site there for about 2 hours, and then our community started showing up in droves, and we were able to push the OPP off our territory. And so after spending a year in the bush there, I lived on the camp there for a long time, and then after a year there, I got broke and I got hungry, and so I went back to work and was ended up getting picked up a year later for all of the things to do with Conestado. And so I ended up spending 7 months in jail. And there was one particular guard that really took exception with me. And so there was a bit of an altercation, and from that, a bunch of folks from the community here came out and had a big protest out in front of Barton Street Jail. And they said that they thought that I was going to break out of Hamilton Wentworth Detention Center, and so they put me in the segregation or solitary confinement. And so that was after 3 months. I was on just in regular general population, and then the last 4 months I spent in segregation, in solitary confinement. And so, and people ask all the time, like, if you know what the consequences of doing what you're doing, like, why do you still do it? And the one guy had added on to that question by saying, well, where are you planning on building your house? And I said, I'm not planning on building a house here. I have a home, and my kids are, we've got a big family, and, our kids will be taken care of. All our kids will have a house that they can call their own. And so, yeah, no, I don't, not for me or my kids, no. And then the guy was so dumbfounded by the answer that he couldn't understand why somebody would risk going to jail, would risk getting shot, would risk seeing all of the things that go along with these stands that we make. And so yeah, so he was quite taken aback by the fact that our connection to the land, that connection of that bit of who we are as Haudenosaunee people, he didn't quite understand what that meant to feel a part of yourself. Like for us, our creation story, like we are created from the clay of the earth. And so that when you see the earth stripped bare the way that it is at 1492 Landback Lane, because they've run the bulldozers over it and flattened every tree, every shrub, every blade of grass is gone from there. And so all that is left is that clay that our people are made from. And so it's a pretty stark reminder for us to see, your bare flesh on the ground. Like that connection to the land is something that like you can't turn off. And so for us, we moved into Landback Lane on July 19th. It was a Sunday evening. Everything that we've done down there has been very deliberate in the way that we've done it. And so one of those very deliberate actions was the very first day that we went in there. And so that was on a Sunday evening. It was about dinner time. We knew that there wasn't going to be any developers there on a Sunday night. And we never wanted to have a violent standoff with the police or with the developer. And so we thought that, if we went in there on a Sunday evening, there was no chance there was going to be anybody from the developer or anybody from the police or Haldeman or anything like that was going to be there. And so that's when we went in. We went in and, made a campfire and put up a couple flags, and, we started to have supper. We ate dinner together and we laughed and joked and told stories around the fire for about an hour. And after about an hour, the cops got called, and they arrived with 2 cruisers, pulled into the driveway, and they asked like how long we had planned on being there. And so a group of us walked over, and he asked me that, and I said, well, our people have been here for the last 10,000 years. I can anticipate that we're going to be here for 10,000 more. And he said, oh, so you're going to be here for a while. And we all kind of laughed and had a little chuckle, and we went about setting up the camp and making sure that everybody was, had a tent and had, a sleeping bag. And mind you, a sleeping bag wasn't as important then because it was 40 degrees in the middle of that desert. Without a blade of grass or a shrub or a tree to grant any shade to anything, it was a warm summer. So we spent the first 17 days in sheer boredom. It was the most boring. The most boring first 17 days I think you could ever have. We had started doing some of the media stuff. We started doing some of the community outreach stuff, but for the most part, we sat around and we told stories and we ate junk food and started to create that community that the family that we are now. And so after the 17th day, OPP had been in constant contact with myself and a couple of the other folks there. They said that they were going to come and read the injunction, and so we had heard it once before, and I said, well, we already know that there's an injunction, like we're not going anywhere. And they said, oh no, there's just a couple of things that have changed to the injunction, and so the sheriff's office wants to come and read that out to you. And so we went down to the front, we sat there, stood up there, and as we waited for the police to arrive to read this injunction, we started to notice that the police had blocked off all the entrances to the camp, and the roads were blocked in every direction. And a dozen, 15 OPP and the sheriff's department folks rolled up to the camp, and got out and started reading this injunction. And as they're reading, this line of about 15 of these 15 passenger vans, big econo vans, started coming down the highway, start coming down Mackenzie Road. And the OPP that had been blocking the road for the last 10 minutes got out of the way. And when they arrived in front of the camp, the line of cars went from, you know, if anybody's ever driven by Mackenzie Meadows there, it's I don't know, maybe 750 meters, half a kilometer to 750 meters across the front. And the line of cars went across the entire thing. And so they called and they said it's time to ask the women and children to leave, and we took that very threatening. And so then we continued on to stay at the camp. And after they started marching in, they started to grab people. Rubber bullets were starting to be fired. One guy was tasered in the neck and in the head. One woman, when she's in her early 20s, the cop that grabbed her, the girl that I'm talking about, she's a non-native girl. She backed up to the road so that she could videotape what was going on. And the cop that grabbed her must have been, geez, he's taller than me. I'm tall. I'm 6'2", and he was bigger than me and much wider than me. And the cop that grabbed a hold of her picked her up onto his shoulder and slammed her into the mud. And it had been raining the day before, and so it was really, the violence that happened that day was something that for a lot of people, nobody had seen that kind of stuff before, from the OPP to people that were, you know, like this particular girl who was just standing there with a camera in her hand, videoing the happenings of what was going on. One guy was held down on the road with a knee in the back of his neck, and another cop holding onto his legs as the guy that was holding onto the legs tried to drag him. The guy that was with his knee in the back of his neck was pushing his face into the pavement as they dragged him, like he's got scars from his cheek to his ear still. And this was, 3 months ago. Like, this is something that he's going to carry with him for the rest of his life, is these scars on his face. And so that day I was among the arrested that day. There was 9 of us. By the time I got out of jail, I got out of jail about 4 hours later. And this woman come running up to me in front of the police station, and she stuck a phone in my face, and she says, "Do you know what's happening on the ground?" And I was kind of startled by this woman putting this phone in my face, and I didn't understand because I didn't know who she was. And so I'm trying to look past the phone. I noticed that there's this fire on the phone that she's trying to show me, and I can hear people yelling and cops, and there's sirens, and so I start looking at the phone, and it's some of my friends and some of my family that from Six Nations here that had started to push the cops away from our community, and so they put up some barricades on Argyle Street and on Highway 6, and and so then we maintained that for about a week. And then we immediately started advocating for those barricades to come down. I mean, I started to advocate for those barricades to come down. There were some folks in our community that wanted to see them up still, that us getting shot at with these rubber bullets and people being tasered and arrested and dragged off of our own lands. And so for us, we wanted to make sure that it was always about the land. Like, this was never supposed to be about barricades. This was never supposed to be about the people of Caledonia. Like, we've never been about wanting to go up and down the Grand River handing out eviction notices to white people that, that are living on our traditional territories. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that these lands are our lands, and we understand that. And most people understand that we have a valid claim over those lands. but this is about a peaceful occupation. This is about us being able to have the right to occupy our own lands. See, the thing is, we're not asking for Canada, and we're certainly not asking Ontario, and most certainly, I guess, we're not asking Haldimand County for the deed to our lands. We have always had the deed to our lands. We've never surrendered that deed, and we've never relinquished any of the control over our traditional ground, our traditional hunting grounds. And so this is, for us, is something that, people keep asking, like, well, this is, what do you want from Ontario, or what do you want from Canada, the federal government to give you? And our consistent statement has been, we don't need anything from them, just to be left alone, because we have been and will maintain that peaceful occupation of our lands. See, the government has worked very, very diligently over the last, I'm going to say, 150 years to divide our community. In the last 100 years, they've enforced the Indian Act elected system here by gunpoint, stationed in RCMP barracks right next to the band council office in the heart of Ohsweken, to make sure that they maintain control over our territory. That was a government coup in 1924, and that is something that stayed that way until today. And then all these, and so these governments and these police and the RCMP before the OPP and the Brits before that looked for all of those cracks in our community to be able to drive those wedges in. And they've divided our community in such in very, very documentable ways. And so when we talk about, what that means for us to be connected to the land, and what that means for us to be able to make the stands that we are, because there's nothing that the courts or their jails, the guns, or anything that the police can do to us that'll make us forget that obligation to the next 7 generations. Everything that we do in this life, we have to maintain that we understand that everything that we do has to be looking forward to whatever those next 7 generations are going to need. And for us, we want the same thing that every other big city or small town has been able to do. Every single big city, every single small town has grown exponentially over the last 100 years. The only places in this country that have gotten smaller and smaller and smaller are reserves. We want the same opportunities to be able to grow and thrive as a community. And so if we are afforded that right to be able to move forward with whatever it looks like for our community to come together, and be able to say that we need the space and time to be able to recover from all of that government.
Government's like, nope.
Nope, there we go. See, I start talking about the government shuts me off. And so this is what we're saying too, is that, we need the space and time to be able to come to the government with one voice. We'd like to very much be able to say that, the band council and the hereditary council, they need to work together. Absolutely. I think that, and a lot of people like me think that. But this is after 100 years of bad doings and mistrust back and forth. This is 100 years of the government meddling with our community to get it to this point. And so whatever time that takes for our community to be able to come together, to have that one voice, to have that unity in our community, we need to be afforded that right. What we don't need is Haldimand County, and we certainly don't, and Brant County. These are the counties that surround our community. We don't need them taking advantage of the fact that the federal and provincial governments has divided our community in such an immaculate way that it is going to take some time for us to come back together. But in that time, you can no longer take advantage of the fact that this is the case. So we are going to say, and we have been saying now for the last 138 days today, that we are not going to abide that our lands be used in the way that they are. That covering everything in concrete and asphalt, this is not what progress looks like for Six Nations. Our communities have, for the last 200 years, lived in relative harmony with the environment around us. You can look down on Google Earth and look at this very, very green spot in the middle of southern Ontario. It is a very distinct line that goes down Indian Town Line and Highway 6 and Highway 24 and all the way up to the Grand River, and you'll see this very, very green square, and that is Six Nations. It is a very, very distinctly differently green spot than all of the surrounding area, because this is the last Carolinian forest that is as big as it is, and it covers the entirety of the reserve. We don't flatten everything and cover everything in concrete and asphalt for the sake of progress. Being able to look out my back door and see deer and foxes and you know, the hawks and the odd eagle come flying through once in a while. You know, this is what progress looks like for us. And so for us to be able to see these governments and these cops and these courts use these tools as injunctions to further colonize and criminalize my people, like, this is something that has gone on now for long enough. And so I think by those courts and those tools that they use in these injunctions, that, like, this is the honor of the crown that people often talk about, that is being dragged through the mud every time there's a OPP intervention or a RCMP intervention in Wet'suwet'en or Sequemic territories, or up in Kitigan-Zibi where they had the moose moratorium, or the RCMP out in Mi'kmaq territory out east, where they did nothing as they watched non-native fishers sink their boats and burn down their warehouses. Like, this is something that isn't just a problem here in Six Nations, but it is a problem that is systemic, and it is something that is something that both in the US and Canada are dealing with in the very same way. That our people have been stripped of our lands, of our identities, with residential school, with stripped of our lands all up and down the track. Like, we are currently sitting on 5% of what was our traditional territory here. And so now, here we are in 2020, and in the midst of a pandemic, and construction is rolling ahead, to see that progress happen, that concrete and asphalt be as far as the eye can see, and in that in itself will hem in our community. And so we want to be able to say, regardless of what progress looks like to you, it is not what progress looks like to us. And so we're going to be able to stay there. We've been there for 138 days today, and we're going to be there for 138 more and 138 more after that, until it is understood that our people are not going to be going anywhere. When I said that we're going to be here for the next 10,000 years, I meant that, and I meant that very truly. And so I hope that I was able to answer some of your questions. And if you have any more questions, I would love to answer them for you.
I look forward to that Skylar has reached out to the community, that anybody in the community can come in to the reserve and sit with him, break bread, have a conversation, and try and learn more about it. And he's invited the community to do that. And some of the community has actually done that on site. But there's still an injunction around that community. I think it might be larger now, where anybody who goes in there is subject to being charged for violating the injunction. Can you go just elaborate on that, Skylar? Just lost him.
Yeah, I'm still here. Sorry, I just turned my camera off there just so that it doesn't cut me off here. I just think we're in the middle of one of those So yeah, no, there is an injunction on the Mackenzie Meadows site, which you can't get to anyway. But the there we go. And so the Mackenzie Meadows does have an injunction on it. It is a permanent injunction, which forever now that judge in Haldeman County decided that land claims for Six Nations were now over. And so yeah, there is a injunction on every single road in all of Haldeman County. And so you are no longer allowed, not just me, but anybody, you are no longer allowed to impede traffic on any Haldeman County road anywhere in the county of Haldeman. And so if you get a flat tire, if you get engine trouble, you better not be impeding traffic on that road or you will be violating that injunction. And so like this is like, but if folks do want to come down and have that conversation with me, to break bread with me, to, you know, I encourage people to do that. Absolutely. And so if you come in through the reserve, you can come down 6 line and you're more than welcome to come in and sit down with me. If you want to be a little more dramatic about your entrance, you can walk past the cops and by the bus if that's something that you're into. You can certainly do that as well, but it's a bit of a hike that way. And so I would suggest coming down 6 line.
The injunction, I know you're appealing the injunction, and you've actually hired, I understand, Ross and McBride, I believe, the law firm, to represent you guys?
Just in the appeal. And so Ross and McBride will be trying to get us reheard in front of a different judge back in Haldeman County at Superior Court. There was a lot of procedural errors that this particular judge had. Another fella that seemed to take exception with me, and so he made lots of errors in law and procedure, and so I have been self-represented to date, and so yeah, we just have a group of us that are, I have wicked smart friends, and so they have we've all learned how to be civil lawyers here over the last 4 months, and so have taught ourselves how to play this game and do it as, in my opinion, better than most of them. And so like I said, my friends are amazingly brilliant folks, and so for us to be able to do that is they make me sound a lot smarter than I actually am.
Scott,
It must be.
I have a question about the federal government. Has the federal government approached you or made any contact?
Yes and no. So yes is the short answer. They were in contact with me about 70 days ago now, I bet. After August 5th, when the barricades went up, they had said that they were interested in coming down to meet with the Confederacy and the Band Council, and they had asked if that was something that I was interested in doing. And at the time, I had said, absolutely not. I'm not a politician. It's not my game, and it certainly isn't my bag to carry. And although the longer that I'm involved in this, the longer it, the more it seems I'm becoming a politician, despite my not wanting to, go down that road whatsoever. But a lot of my conversations are one similar to this, only with folks that would like to push the OPP to come in and arrest me, and so yeah. So far, I've only been arrested from August 5th, and so there are lots and lots more warrants right now for my arrest and for lots of my friends and family that have been involved. And so from August 5th, from July 19th to August 5th, and that was before any of the barricades on the roads went up that day. the Crown is asking for 1.5 years in jail for me for that. And that was before barricades. That was before any OPP altercations. That was before roads got dug up. That was before all of it. And so I'm sure that they're going to try very hard to, even though I had absolutely nothing to do with those things, they're going to try and stick all of it on me. And so it is something that we are very, very aware of.
Yep, Joy.
You spoke about Six Nations people speaking with one voice and coming together and not being divided as they have been by the federal government from 1924 on. I've spoken to Lonnie Bomberry in the Land Claims Office, and he said that this claim was not part of their claims, and that from what I understand, even the elected band council had accepted full consultation from the developer and a swap of land in addition to what had already been agreed on as a form of consultation that is required for any organization working with Six Nations Band Council. And I'm just thinking that this still is not a united voice then. I think all the people of Six Nations would support land claims in general and any action against systemic racism or the wrongs that have been committed against the people for forever. There's no doubt about that, but you're still not speaking with one voice. It's still not a official land claim for Six Nations. And I'm just wondering how you can justify that aspect of it, or how do you plan on bringing that one voice together? In the sense also, just as another comment or thought, the land claims and the arguments are against the federal government, and I think you'd have a lot more success building bridges or building relationships with the people of Caledonia and the people of Brantford to come with you as allies instead of digging up the highway and blocking them, causing all kinds of anger and that sort of thing. And how would you build relationships more on a positive note with those people who could be your allies against the federal government and the Crown?
So you're gonna have to bear with me a little bit here because that was like 15 questions in there.
I know. All right.
So, let me start at the start with Lonnie Bomberry and the consultation and accommodation deal that they accepted. And so anytime that this particular developer, so Michael Corrado came here in 2013. That was consultation. That was a consultation process. So he came and he had about 5 community engagement sessions where they answered questions and they handed out surveys, and then they put a survey in every single mailbox in this community, every single one. Our community came out with a resounding, and I mean resounding, no to that development. And that developer, he pulled back. He said, absolutely, like I don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. In 2016, he sold that land to Lozani and Foxgate. And Foxgate decided that they were going to push ahead with that. So in 2018, they got some bylaw changes and they came to Six Nations. And they came and they had a meeting in the middle of town. It was about 20 minutes long. They put up a couple of posters and walked out the door. They then went to band council with a bag of money and they said, here's $352,000. We're going to buy you next to the dump in Hagersville, 42 acres. And we're going to give you that. And so then, and at that time, the question was, well, what if we don't agree? Well, it doesn't matter whether you agree or not. The development's going ahead regardless. So either you can take the money and development goes on, or you cannot take the money and development goes on. And so in terms of consultation, whether or not that's a combination or I know the federal government right now is just working out the finer deals or the finer points of signing onto the UNDRIP stuff, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And all of that, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action, whether we're talking about GLADU stuff and the court stuff that talks about the massive divide between Indigenous people and the courts. And these aren't something that is talked about in, you know, academic circles. This is stuff that is well enshrined in the Supreme Court, well enshrined at the Ontario Court of Appeal. So these are the things that we're talking about when we're talking about whether or not this was consultation or accommodation. So whenever a community makes a stand for these kinds of lands, in Oneida Township, I'm sorry, maybe there's some confusion over the what it was that you were talking with Lonnie about, but the Oneida Township is certainly part of those land claims. The specific claims process over that particular lot, it is not part of their land claim, because this is the thing, is land claims in this country have absolutely nothing to do with land. They are only about dollars and cents, and that is it. Land is never on the table, and land is not part of that discussion whatsoever. And so for us as a community to say at least that we are not going to be hemmed in, that we are going to move forward, and the band council has come out mildly supportive about 3 weeks ago, and so they are coming on board now and are in an exploratory process now to see how it is that they can get out of the contract that they had with Lozani and Foxgate, and so that they can get on board to help in intervening in the court case against me. And so this particular council disagrees with the last council and their decision to in Lonnie to sign on to this consultation and accommodation deal, because regardless of whether or not they signed on to that deal, this development was going to be moving forward. And so that is not a precedent that I would like for our community to start setting, that after proper consultation was done with our community, we said no. Developer sold to another company. We said, well, I'm not going to do that, and just pushed ahead.
And what about the relations with Caledonia folks, or not?
Absolutely. You know what? And I try really, really hard to not point the finger of blame at anybody. Because here's the thing is, as much as I don't disagree with the barricades, as much as I disagree with burning tires and all of the kinds of things that you seen on the very first day that the barricades went up, and that was the only day that happened, I understand that, you know, this is what 400 years of hate and oppression and racism and over incarceration, this is what people that have been oppressed to the point where we can no longer grow and thrive, because that's the only thing that we want, is the same thing that you want for your community, is to be able to grow and thrive and do all of the things that every single, I don't care if it's a big city or a small town, every community from coast to coast has grown and grown and grown. The only ones that have not are reserves. And so for us, this is a whole other nation of people. We are not Canadians I'm not a Canadian citizen. I'm a Mohawk. And so my dad's an Onondaga, you know, and one of the people that sit next to me is a Cayuga. You know, like, these are entire nations of people. This country there was, you know, over 400 nations here before Europeans arrived on our shores. And so this for us is an important fact, that our national pride is just as important to us as your national pride is to you.
So are you opening up Highway 6 and Mackenzie Road?
Not right yet. These are conversations that are happening though, yes. yeah, these are conversations that are in the works.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
There was a couple of Saturdays ago, there was a community-driven reconciliation attempt, if you will, to have the local people come out and meet with the indigenous at the barricade where the OPP were all lined up. So there was a conversation that went off in a parking lot to begin with, and then moved to the barrier because Skylar didn't want to come across that barrier because the OPP was sitting in wait for him to do that, and met him and the other indigenous people there, land defenders there. So it was an attempt for the Caledonia, and the residents did this. There's a couple of residents in Caledonia that started this drive to have the people of Caledonia meet with the indigenous community and just understand one another in this process. It was somewhat successful. It wasn't a huge turnout, but they also invited the government to come out and the government officials to come out to this little meeting as well, but they did not show up. Nobody from the government showed up. So it was residents there. A couple of them were talking about, well, just open up the land, open up the roads to get on with it. But mostly they were supportive of everything going on. And then we all moved over to the barricade to meet with the indigenous people, and it just sort of mingle a little bit with them. It was an attempt by the Caledonians to try and mend the fences a little bit, if you will.
Oh, I have no doubt that, you know, the people of Caledonia would like to see those roads open. But they also really have, I would say the majority of people don't have any complaints or issues with Six Nations, been neighbors forever. Especially my family, I'm from Caledonia, just so you know. My family, my heritage, crossed from the 1776 revolution with Six Nations people. So we've shared the Grand River from the very beginning when the Anishinaabe handed the land, or the Haudenosaunee bought the land from the Anishinaabe. My family was with Brant and the other members of Six Nations that crossed that border at that time. So I share the same history and share the same belief that, you know, there's no doubt there's been wrongdoings, terrible wrongdoings for a very long time that needs justice, you know, there's justice required. But I'd rather see the two groups of people standing together against the federal government than standing opposed to each other and causing more anger and more nastiness that just is not good for anyone.
And I 100% agree with you on that. And so and that's exactly what's in the works right now.
Good.
And so those things are happening.
Awesome.
In the meantime of all of that though, is there's still continued OPP meddling in that. And so the OPP continue to go from one group to the other, trying to stir division still. And so that these are things that for folks like myself that have been doing this kind of work a long time, have seen over and over and over, and seen those very same tactics come up time and time again. And so in terms of inconvenience for folks in Caledonia, I do apologize for any inconvenience that has occurred. But when those shotgun barrels are pointed at my wife, that safety from police violence, for us making a stand for our lands, is unacceptable and is infuriating for a lot of people. And so in terms of keeping my people safe, that's why those barricades are there. And so if I have to see a 12-gauge shotgun pointed at the chests of the women in my community, who weren't doing anything actually, but sitting on the side of the road, And so for them to be pointed these guns at for rubber bullets, because they don't tell you that these are rubber bullets when they start firing. They don't yell out first, hey, we're going to shoot rubber bullets at you, and then start firing. They just start firing. And so that gun, for any hunter, knows what a 12 gauge looks like and understands what comes out of those. And so we understand that when they point these guns at us, what that means. And these last two altercations that have happened with the OPP have meant that people in our community have been hit by those rubber bullets. That our people have been tasered and beaten and dragged and scarred. And so when it is difficult for me to compare the inconvenience of having that 7-minute drive to go around to York to that extreme violence, because that is the only language that the OPP has, is that violence. And so for us, we've been talking about peaceful dialogue, negotiations, about having whatever it takes to do whatever it takes to maintain peace in all of this.
So are you supportive of the global solution?
I am supportive of parts of it, sure. There is there are lots of our lands that are being currently occupied. That I'm not somebody who is an advocate for eviction notices up and down the Grand River.
Right.
And so, you know, for people and families like yourselves that have lived there for the last, you know, some people 100 years, 200 years, like it's been a long time. And so,
as long as some of you guys.
this is it. And so, so yeah, so like this is where we're coming from, is that we want to be able to find a solution that sees our lands start to come back to us, because the additions to reserve process is broken. It does not work for Six Nations ever. There's not, like our reserve, we own lots of land. Both the Hereditary Council and the Band Council both own tons of land off the reserve that we currently cannot get added to the reserve, because those municipalities that they reside in have veto power over them.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're not going to get elected next term if you're choosing to shrink your tax base. Because if I was the incumbent and I was running against the incumbent, I would say, why would you vote for that guy? He's shrinking your tax base. And so it is really, really difficult to understand that Brant County and Haldeman County both hold sway and over our community's ability to grow and thrive as a community, as those communities have been able to grow and thrive the way that they have. Like Caledonia used to be a one-horse town, and now it is a bustling urban sprawl that has just continued to grow and grow and grow. Like if you want to talk about McClung Road and the what was it, the what that kind of child or trafficking, sex trafficking thing that happened over there last year, and like this is, you know, these are the things that happen as these towns and this urban sprawl continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you know, the drugs and the crime and all of that start to come and encroaching on our communities. And like this is something, like my kids go to school in Caledonia. I've gone to school in Caledonia. My wife went to school, and like we have lots of friends there and family there, and so like we don't want to see any kind of hate and anger continue to bubble over here.
Okay, I think I'm going to thank you so much, Skylar. Thank you so much for your openness and for your time and stuff. This has been really, really informative, and I really appreciate you taking the time to educate us. And just to be mindful of everyone's time, I would just say, like, yeah. Skylar, is there any closing comment you want to make to us?
If coming out to support is something that you want to do, absolutely, I encourage you to come out. The GoFundMe for our legal defense is always something that we want to do. So if you want to look up 1492 Landback Lane on GoFundMe, you'll find our campaign there. And if contributing to the camp and making sure that we're able to stay there throughout the winter, we've got our finance committee set up an email so that people can e-transfer dollars to that. Landback, the number 6, nations@gmail.com.
Great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
It's been really, really good to have you here and to just hear a perspective that we often don't get to hear, that gets drowned out by everything else. So I really appreciate that. So thank you. And we're going to go on and just have a quick finish of the meeting. You're willing to sit in, but you're also free to go. So thanks so much.
Thank you very much. I do have to run, guys.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate you guys listening to everything that's going on. And I really appreciate the Rotary Club and what the HIP is pushing forward, and honoring Indigenous people is something that is really important for lots of folks to be able to get involved with. And I really encourage you guys to keep doing the work that you guys are doing. It's amazing. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Skylar.
All right. Take care, guys.
Okay, so we did say we wanted to, this was an hour meeting, so to be fair and stuff. So we also had said if anybody had anything that they were working on right now that they really wanted to share, but I think what I'll do first is I'll talk about our next meeting. So I think in the agenda that Jim sent out, he suggested, that we look at late January or early to mid-February to have our next meeting. So I think he kind of suggested dates of January 28th, February 4, or February 11. Does anybody who's here have, are there any ones that are better than others of those dates? Okay, so what if we just select February 4? It's the middle of those things, and so we'll set up for a February. So if you can pencil that into your calendar, that'd be good, and we'll get out a meeting notice and that sort of thing. And then before we go, I just say to everybody, is there anything, like, this has been a difficult time, especially a difficult time for working with Jim, and I work with more remote First Nations, and so it's been difficult because many of them have been on lockdown, and even the Mississaugas of Credit, who we've been working with their school, the school has been out since the start of COVID. So if anybody has stuff though that they've been working on and would like to share it right now, I would offer that opportunity. Okay, is there any feedback? Yes, Kent.
I just wanted to share, I've been spending a lot of time reading and educating myself because when we're all locked in, might as well. So here's a book I just got from Amazon. It's called The Clay We're Made Of by Susan Hill. So I don't know if any of you are familiar, have read it, but it's very topical to what's going on here. So it's the Haudenosaunee land tenure on the Grand River is the theme of it. And I just started it, so I can't tell you very much. It was recommended by Dakota Brandt, who was my Mohawk teacher when I was in class a while ago. So anyway, I'll let you know how it is. And if you guys want to try and find it and read it yourself, I'm sure, particularly Joy, I'm sure if you haven't read it, it's probably really interesting to you.
Cool. I will check it out.
We've been meeting with some of the RotaryHip groups in other parts of the country, and one of them has a book club. They operate online, pick a First Nations book and read it and talk about it. And that's kind of an interesting thought. So I'll just put that out there for consideration.
Great. Okay. So is there any feedback on this session? We did, you know, something slightly different because Gary had been out and had contact and Skylar was willing. So any feedback on the session that we did this evening?
It was good. Good information. Good. You know, good to hear. You know, Skylar's point of view, right, direct from himself. So that was informative, and I still think that the problem is bigger than just land back lane. It's huge, and I'm not sure that this protest will solve the issue, but at least it gets people thinking about it and talking about it, and hopefully we'll learn how to go forward. Yeah.
Yeah, the issue is at the federal government level, and they don't get involved in this. They pay lip service to it, but they do not get involved. So you got the local government and provincial government trying to settle a land dispute situation, which is a land dispute with the Crown, i.e. Canada,
Right.
federal government, not local. Yet he has to answer to local courts and OPP. I can tell you the OPP are, when I went up there, they're at every entrance to the reserve. They just got a car just sitting there, not doing anything, just sitting there with a cop in the car. Just to intimidation, the factor, we got the place surrounded. At the land back, at the barrier there, when we had the meeting with the Caledonia residents and when we moved up there, there was 4 cop cars there and two undercover cop cars sitting in a parking lot at the Canadian Tire, I think it is, whatever it is there. Sitting there as well, just watching what's going on, taking pictures. They had a couple of cameramen mingle with the crowd so they could take photos of the crowd was there. They were obvious who they were, but they plain clothes, just taking pictures of the crowd, trying to identify people. So what they've done is arrest people at their homes there. They'll find out who you are and wait till you're at your house, wherever that may be, not in Caledonia, it could be anywhere. And they'll arrive at your house and arrest you, take you away in cuffs in front of everybody. So the whole thing's intimidation factor is going on right now, which is really, really sad. So you got the locals putting pressure on there, like local cops and courts putting pressure on, when it can only be resolved at the federal level. So I agree with you. They have to stand their ground, I guess, in what they think is right for their land. But you can't solve it through the provincial courts, and yet they're spending money and time, money they don't have, by the way, but spend time on provincial courts without any resolve. It cannot be resolved at that level. Because the builder comes in and says, I got a legitimate close to this land. Look, I bought it. I got a deed. They're saying that deed doesn't matter because the land isn't theirs to sell. It's impossible.
It gets messy though when the Six Nations Council accepts $350,000 of money and land in exchange for the right to develop based on the consultation accommodation process. And when they accept it, and then the developer proceeds only to be stopped. This is happened twice now. We got Douglas Creek Estates, and now we've got Meadows right next door to it. And I got to say, I'm starting to get concerned that this is a developer's scam, because they go buy land next to Six Nations, they get a few protesters to come out, and boom, next thing you know, government gives you a couple $1 million, you get to go away. This is not good for Ontario people who are paying these taxes. We're paying huge taxes out for OPP to be sitting there. And it's not just 4 cars. I mean, go over to the Caledonia Arena. It's 30 cars sitting there every single day. This is a very expensive process.
What Skylar didn't say, that he had told me earlier, was that the band council, the elected band council, that only 4% of the people even voted for the band council. They don't believe in the band council. Has these kind of, as far as they're concerned, the band council is set up by the federal government, which it is, and answers to the federal government and gets money from the federal government to do things in the community, but they're not in charge of the land. The hereditary chiefs are in charge of the land. So 4% voted for them, so they didn't realize what was going on until much later in the process.
That is true. I mean, what you're saying is true. I'm surprised to hear it's 4%. I thought it was 2%. So I mean, it's actually doubled over the years. But the issue is also with the Confederacy. even the people on Six Nations, when the government dissolved the Confederacy, or the
Hereditary chiefs.
Hereditary chiefs, when they dissolved them in 1924, they didn't keep up the process. They've lost the connections. So now the people, even if you talk to the people of Six Nations, they don't like the Confederacy either. They don't believe that the clan mothers are the right clan mothers. They don't believe the chiefs are the right chiefs. They've lost their history. They've lost their connections. So you've got a divided community there with two leaderships that don't speak for anyone. And it's very, very frustrating. They have to come up with, their biggest problem is governance, and that's their issue. They got to figure it out, but they got to find a way that works for them, that they've got solid governance structure that speaks for all of the people with one voice. And I don't know how they're going to come up with that. That's another whole big problem.
That is, and it
Can't even do it in our elections.
addressed.
That's right.
Yeah, it's starting to be addressed by a number of bands, and in fact the Mississaugas of New Credit, who are right next door there, have got together with a bunch of other Mississauga bands to start working on overall governance issues, and they're receiving some support. But I mean, that's really that's a critical thing. But I mean, as you hear, how many years did it take to get in this mess? It's not going to be solved overnight. I know when I listen to my First Nations friends and stuff, and they go, it took us 7 generations to get here, and it'll take us 7. I sit there going, wow, no. But I think that somewhere in between I'd like a fix tomorrow and their 7 generations is really where we're going to be.
Mm-hmm.
There's signs of hope. Signs of progress.
Anyways, Lisa, I saw you put your unmuted. So did you have something you wanted to share?
Just wanted to thank you for this opportunity this evening to hear Skylar. I found it extremely informative. And I just thank you for doing this. It really has opened my eyes, and I appreciate hearing him directly.
Great. So, I mean, I think that, and Reg sent a little note around saying, so if people have, you know, suggestions for hearing different viewpoints and stuff, I think it may be, you know, something that we want to do every now and then to just educate ourselves, so that then we can be better educated and share the message more with people, so that we've got a different perspective. I went to a friend of mine to say, you know, if you want to sit in, I don't think we'll have so many people, so it would be fine. And I said to him, it's going to be one-sided. That is, you know, that is what it is. But I think kind of where we are right now, sometimes the one-sided discussions are good, just to be able to hear that point of view, and then we can, you know, work on our own and assimilating that and putting it in a perspective. So thank you all very much. We've got February 4 for getting together next, and if you have any ideas for things you'd like to hear, that'd be great.
Or agenda items.
Yeah, or agenda items, that'd be really good. And I mean, hopefully things are, who knows? I mean, it doesn't look like we're heading right now to opening up really shortly. It looks like more like we might be going the other way. But as things open up, we will be able to have more good conversations and stuff. So thank you all very much.
All right.
I'd like to wish everyone well and joy over the holidays. Joy.
and safety.
Yeah.
Be safe.
Safe.
Yes.
Stay safe, everybody.
Great.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to all.
Merry Christmas.
Merry
Good deal.
Christmas.
And to all a good night.
For organizing.
See you, everybody. No, I need to get out of that. Just gonna